Stop for a moment and picture this in your mind. An entire city of churches, not constructed with brick or mortar, but carved with breathtaking precision directly into the mountainside. This isn't a scene from a fantasy novel. It's a real, tangible place hidden in the highlands of Ethiopia. More than 8 centuries ago, an incredible feat of engineering and faith gave rise to what we now know as Lalibela, a place so astonishing that its very existence challenges our understanding of what ancient civilizations were capable of. The sheer scale is almost incomprehensible. Imagine standing before a solid rock face and envisioning within it a labyrinth of interconnected chapels, tunnels, and sanctuaries, all hewn by hand. The question isn't just how they did it, but why here, and who possessed the vision and the unwavering determination to see it through. This is more than just a historical site. It's a monument to human ingenuity that continues to whisper its secrets across the ages, inviting us to listen. Legends speak of a divine vision granted to a king, a man named Lalibela, who is said to have been guided by angels and even journeyed to Jerusalem itself. The story goes that he returned with a celestial mandate to create a new holy city, a second Jerusalem, right here in the heart of Africa. But legends, while captivating, only deepen the mystery. How does celestial inspiration translate into the back-breaking, decades-long labor of carving 11 majestic churches from solid volcanic rock? Each structure is a unique masterpiece, from the iconic cross-shaped Church of St. George, seemingly sunken into the earth, to the multi-story Beta Mariam, with its intricate columns and archways all formed from a single continuous piece of stone. The precision is staggering, the architectural knowledge profound. It forces us to wonder about the master builders, the unnamed artisans and engineers whose hands shaped this sacred complex. Were they local craftsmen, or did knowledge flow from distant lands carried by travelers along ancient trade routes? The silence of the stones offers no easy answers, only more compelling questions. Today, we are going on a journey together to unravel this enigma. We will explore the shadowy corners of history, sifting through the clues left behind. We'll examine the mind-boggling engineering techniques that allowed for such a monumental achievement without the technology we take for granted. We will confront the theories, some orthodox, some fringe, that attempt to explain the seemingly impossible. From the sophisticated drainage systems that keep the churches dry to the mysterious symbolism encoded in their very layout, every detail holds a piece of the puzzle. This is a story that transcends mere archaeology. It's a testament to the power of faith, the brilliance of the human spirit, and the enduring allure of the unknown. So prepare to have everything you thought you knew about ancient construction challenged, because the secrets of the Lalibela Churches are about to take you on a ride you won't soon forget. At the very heart of this mystery stands the figure of King Jeba Meskel Lalibela, a ruler whose life story is so intertwined with myth that separating the man from the legend is our first great challenge. He reigned during a pivotal era, roughly from the late 12th to the early 13th century, a time when the Christian world was reeling from the loss of its most holy city. It's against this backdrop of spiritual crisis that the most enduring tale of Lalibela's mission emerges. According to the ancient texts and the stories passed down through generations, the king's journey to Builder began with a near-death experience. Rival factions within the royal court, threatened by his growing influence, allegedly poisoned him. What happened next would define his legacy forever. He fell into a deep coma, a sleep so profound that he was believed to be dead for 3 entire days. But his consciousness, the legends say, was on an incredible journey. He was transported to the heavens, standing in the presence of God. It was in this divine realm that he received his monumental charge, with the earthly Jerusalem now under Muslim control, cutting off the sacred pilgrimage routes for Ethiopian Christians. God commanded Lalibela to construct a new holy city, a second Jerusalem, right there in the rugged highlands of his own kingdom. This wasn't a mere suggestion, it was a celestial blueprint. The stories describe how he was shown the plans for the churches in vivid detail, their forms and layouts imprinted directly onto his soul. He awoke from his 3-day slumber not just a king, but a prophet and an architect possessed of a vision that was literally otherworldly. This origin story does more than just add a layer of spiritual significance. It directly confronts our modern, engineering-focused perspective. It suggests that the knowledge required for such an audacious construction project didn't come from human trial and error, but was delivered, fully formed from a higher power. This narrative of divine inspiration serves a profound purpose. For the faithful, it elevates Lalibela from a historical site to a living testament of God's work on earth, explaining the seemingly impossible nature of its creation. For historians and skeptics, however, it presents a fascinating puzzle. Could a powerful and clever ruler have used a compelling spiritual narrative to mobilize an entire population for a decades-long national project? By framing the construction as a divine mandate, he would have ensured unwavering dedication, a limitless supply of labor, and a unifying purpose that transcended ordinary human ambition. The legend effectively shields the project from mundane questions, placing its origins in a realm beyond our scrutiny. Yet it also begs us to look closer. What if the divine vision was a metaphor for a moment of profound genius insight? Or what if it was a political masterstroke, a story crafted to consolidate his power and cement his legacy for all time? The truth behind King Lalibela's vision remains one of history's most captivating enigmas, a story where faith and ambition are inseparably carved into the very rock. But a divine vision, no matter how powerful, needs a physical canvas, and the canvas chosen for this celestial blueprint was as ambitious as the vision itself. The Lalibela complex is not merely a collection of churches, it's an entire topographical scripture, a holy city engineered directly into the rugged landscape. To truly grasp the magnitude of this achievement, you need to understand its layout. The 11 churches are not randomly scattered. They are thoughtfully organized into 2 distinct symbolic clusters, separated by a channel known as the River Jordan. To the northwest lies one group representing the earthly Jerusalem, the city of human struggle and temporal power. To the southeast, across the water, rests the second group, symbolizing the heavenly Jerusalem, the eternal city of God and divine salvation. This physical division is the very heart of the pilgrim's experience. The journey from one side to the other across the symbolic river is a spiritual reenactment of the passage from our mortal world into the promise of paradise. It transforms a simple visit into a profound walking meditation. Now, let's talk about the sheer physical audacity of what was accomplished here. We're not looking at buildings constructed from the ground up with quarried stone. Every single one of these 11 structures is a monolithic church, meaning each was carved in its entirety from a single massive block of living rock. The builders didn't add to the landscape, they revealed the sacred architecture they believed was already hidden within it. The process was one of staggering subtraction. First, they would carve a deep, wide trench directly into the plateau, isolating a gigantic block of solid volcanic rock. Then, working from the top down, a method that defies conventional logic, they would painstakingly hollow out this block, chiseling away the interior to create naves, sanctuaries, and aisles, while simultaneously sculpting the exterior into intricate facades, windows, and roofs. They created the space and the structure simultaneously, a bit like carving a detailed sculpture from the inside out, all while standing on terrifyingly high scaffolds. The volume of rock that had to be removed to accomplish this is almost beyond comprehension. Conservative estimates suggest that well over 100,000 cubic meters of hard volcanic rock were excavated. To put that into perspective, that's enough material to fill dozens of Olympic-sized swimming pools, and they did it all with rudimentary tools, hammers, chisels, and wedges likely made of iron. There were no dynamite blasts, no diesel-powered excavators, no laser-guided cutting tools. This was a symphony of human muscle, patience, and unimaginable precision, echoing for decades across the highlands. Think about the margin for error. A single miscalculation, one strike of the chisel in the wrong place, could have cracked the entire block, rendering years of work a pile of rubble. The confidence required to execute this on such a scale speaks to a level of architectural and engineering genius that we are still struggling to fully explain. Connecting these two symbolic clusters of churches is a labyrinth of tunnels, narrow passages, and ceremonial trenches. This network is not merely functional, it is deeply theological. Pilgrims don't just walk from one church to another, they embark on a symbolic journey. They might descend into a dark, narrow tunnel, representing the darkness of the tomb or the struggles of earthly life, only to emerge into the brilliant sunlight of a church courtyard, symbolizing resurrection and divine light. One of the most famous passages leads to the Church of St. George, the iconic cross-shaped church that appears to be sunken into the ground. Approaching it involves walking down a trench, with the towering walls of rock slowly revealing the perfect form of the church below, an experience designed to inspire awe and humility. Every step, every turn, every ascent and descent was carefully choreographed to mirror the spiritual journey of the believer, making the entire complex a massive, three-dimensional storybook of faith. This was more than architecture, it was a physical pathway to transcendence, carved not just from rock, but from a profound understanding of the human soul's longing for connection with the divine. And standing apart from this carefully planned spiritual map in solemn isolation is perhaps the most breathtaking of all the structures, the Church of St. George or Custodians. While the other churches are grouped in their symbolic clusters, this one sits alone, a perfect three-dimensional cross sunk into a deep, rectangular pit. Its separation is one of the first mysteries that captivates any visitor. Why was this masterpiece set apart? Some scholars suggest it was the final church to be built, a crowning achievement dedicated to Ethiopia's patron saint, and thus placed in its own sacred precinct. Others propose a more symbolic reason, that its isolated, sunken form represents a kind of holy of holies, a direct conduit to the divine that stands outside the pilgrim's defined path, accessible only to those who seek it with singular purpose. Its very location feels intentional, as if it were meant to be discovered, its full glory only revealing itself when you stand at the very edge of the pit and look down. The precision with which Custodians was executed is nothing short of miraculous. From above, the roof forms a flawless Greek cross, each arm identical in length and width, a geometric perfection that seems almost machined. But the true genius reveals itself when you consider the engineering. The entire church was carved from a single block of pinkish volcanic rock, and the builders had to account for the relentless seasonal rain. They integrated a network of drainage channels so effective that, even centuries later, not a drop of water pools inside the church. These aren't just simple gutters, they are an integral part of the design, carved with such a precise gradient that water is channeled away instantly and directed into a deep, natural well. This implies the builders possessed an incredibly sophisticated understanding of hydrology and topography. They weren't just sculptors, they were master surveyors who could visualize the entire water table and plan their masterpiece around it, ensuring its survival for generations. The question of how they achieved such exact angles and levels without modern tools remains a central puzzle. Of course, such perfection inevitably breeds legend. The local lore that has been passed down through the centuries offers an explanation as beautiful as the church itself. It is said that while the workers toiled by day, angels would descend at night, their celestial tools picking up where the human hands left off, their otherworldly labor accounting for the impossible symmetry and the flawless finish. This story speaks to a profound human truth. When faced with something that surpasses everyday understanding, we often reach for the transcendent to explain it. The angelic narrative isn't just a quaint tale, it's a testament to the awe that Bitegiorgis has inspired for over 800 years. It acknowledges that the skill involved seemed, to the people of the time and even to us today, to border on the supernatural. This combination of divine legend and earthly, inexplicable precision is why the image of Bitegiorgis has become the defining poster child for Lalibela's mystery. Its iconic form, visible only from above, is both instantly recognizable and profoundly enigmatic. It serves as the ultimate symbol of the entire complex, a structure that is simultaneously grounded in the physical world and seemingly detached from it, a perfect marriage of faith and engineering that continues to challenge our perceptions of the possible. It stands as a silent, stubborn question carved in stone, refusing to give up its secrets easily. Given the staggering ambition of the project and the limitations of the era, the most immediate question is also the most practical. What tools could possibly have accomplished this? The conventional historical answer is disarmingly simple, almost to the point of seeming inadequate. The primary toolkit consisted of the most basic instruments, iron chisels, heavy hammers, and likely wooden wedges that would be soaked in water to expand and fracture the rock. It was a technology that had been used for millennia, and on the surface, it appears utterly incapable of producing the geometric perfection we see at Lalibela. Consider the sheer physical toll. Workers would have struck these iron chisels with sledgehammers not just thousands but millions of times, slowly, painfully pecking away at one of the hardest materials on Earth. The noise alone must have been deafening, a constant, percussive symphony of creation that echoed through the valley for generations. The dust, the heat, the constant strain, it paints a picture of almost unimaginable human effort. Yet, when you place a simple iron chisel next to the flawless, smooth walls of Bite Mariam or the intricate, arched windows of Bite Medhain Alam, a glaring disconnect emerges. How do you achieve such perfect right angles, such smoothly curved vaults, and such elaborate exterior detailing with tools that seem better suited for rough quarrying than for fine architectural sculpture? This is where the mystery deepens beyond simple effort and into the realm of sophisticated knowledge. The builders clearly possessed an advanced understanding of stone's properties. They knew how to work with the natural grain of the rock, carving in specific directions to avoid fracturing the entire block. They must have employed complex surveying techniques, using water levels, plumb bobs, and measuring chords to maintain consistency and alignment across the entire complex. This points to a master plan, a set of detailed guidelines that were followed with unwavering precision for decades, suggesting the presence of a master architect or a guild of builders with knowledge that was far from rudimentary. This gap between the simple tools and the complex result has naturally fueled alternative theories. One compelling line of thought involves the possibility of a lost or forgotten ancient technology. Some researchers point to the use of specially formulated organic solvents. There are traditions in other parts of the world, from South America to ancient Egypt, that speak of plant-based liquids that could soften stone, allowing it to be molded or carved more easily. While no direct evidence of such a substance has been found at Lalibela, the idea persists as a potential explanation for the smooth, almost polished surfaces that seem to defy the marks of a chisel. Another, more esoteric theory suggests the use of sonic or vibrational technology, a concept that, while it sounds like science fiction, finds echoes in legends from various cultures that speak of using sound to levitate or shape massive stones. These ideas lie on the fringe of archaeology, but they emerge from a very real and legitimate question. Could the builders have possessed a technical secret that has since been lost to history? Alongside these technological speculations, the oral traditions of the local community offer a different kind of clue, one wrapped in the language of legend and memory. The stories speak of a mysterious, white-skinned master builder named Sidi Meskel or Sidi Gabriel, a figure credited with overseeing the most challenging aspects of the construction. This is a critical piece of the puzzle because it introduces the possibility of outside influence. Who was Sidi Meskel? Mainstream scholarship often interprets this figure as a reference to an artisan or a team of artisans from Coptic Egypt, a Christian kingdom with a long and illustrious history of its own, and one that had strong religious and political ties with medieval Ethiopia. This would have been a natural conduit for architectural knowledge, a sharing of expertise across the Red Sea that could account for the sophisticated techniques on display. But the plot thickens considerably when you consider the timeline. King Lalibela's reign coincided almost perfectly with the era of the Crusades, and specifically with the period following the loss of Jerusalem in 1187. This was a time when the most famous military order of the day, the Knights Templar, were scattered, their power and influence waning in the Holy Land. Intriguingly, the Templars were not just warriors, they were also renowned builders responsible for constructing some of the most formidable castles in the world. Furthermore, they were known to be intensely interested in holy relics and ancient architectural secrets. The theory, though highly speculative, proposes that a contingent of Templars displaced after the fall of Jerusalem could have journeyed to Africa, offering their advanced engineering skills to King Lalibela's divine project in exchange for sanctuary. The symbolic layout of Lalibela as a New Jerusalem would have held powerful appeal for them. While there is no definitive proof in the historical record, the idea adds a thrilling layer of international intrigue, connecting this remote Ethiopian highland to the grand, turbulent narrative of the medieval world. And then, of course, there are the stories that transcend human explanation altogether, the legends of angelic assistance. As with the Church of St. George, many accounts insist that while the human workforce labored by day, a host of angels would descend at night, their work progressing at a supernatural pace, their divine tools accomplishing in hours what would take men weeks. Another beautiful tradition claims that the entire complex was built with the help of a massive, invisible canopy that shielded the workers from the sun and rain, allowing for uninterrupted work. We must listen to these stories not as literal historical accounts, but as profound cultural testimonials. They are the community's way of expressing that what happened here was so extraordinary, so far beyond the ordinary scope of human achievement, that it required an explanation that reached beyond the human. The legends of angels and divine help are, in their own way, a historical source. They tell us that the people closest to the creation of Lalibela recognized its achievement as miraculous, blurring the line between human ingenuity and divine intervention so completely that they have become one and the same in the local consciousness. So we have the legend of a divinely inspired king and the staggering physical reality of the churches themselves. But this brings us face to face with one of the most heated debates surrounding Lalibela, the question of time. How long did it actually take to create this rock-hewn miracle? The official story, preserved in the royal chronicles and echoed by local priests for centuries, is as astonishing as the buildings. It claims that the entire complex of 11 monolithic churches was completed in just 24 years during King Lalibela's reign. Let that number sink in for a moment. 24 years to carve over 100,000 cubic meters of solid rock by hand with simple tools, creating not just rough structures but architecturally refined, interconnected sanctuaries with perfect drainage and elaborate symbolism. If true, this wouldn't just be a testament to hard work. It would border on the miraculous, requiring a workforce of thousands laboring in a perfectly coordinated, around-the-clock frenzy for a generation. It's a timeline that seems to support the legends of angelic assistance because from a purely logistical perspective, it feels almost impossibly short. This traditional timeline, however, is precisely where archaeology steps in to present a compelling counter-narrative. Modern scientific techniques have begun to peel back the layers of legend, and they are revealing a story that is far more complex and in many ways even more fascinating. The key evidence comes from radiocarbon dating, a process that analyzes the decay of carbon in organic materials to determine their age. Scientists have taken samples from the mortar used in some of the churches. Now, this mortar is critical. It wasn't used in the primary carving, but for things like setting decorative elements, sealing cracks, or in later repairs. When these samples were analyzed, the results sent shockwaves through the historical community. The carbon dates didn't all cluster neatly within a tight 24-year window in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. Instead, they sprawled across a much wider time frame, with some samples dating back as early as the 10th century and others pointing to continued work and modification as late as the 15th century. This evidence fundamentally challenges the idea of a single, frenzied construction period under one king. It paints a picture of Lalibela not as a project with a definitive start and finish, but as a living, evolving sacred site. What we might be looking at is a long process of phased development. It's entirely possible that the site was already a place of spiritual significance before King Lalibela was even born, perhaps with smaller, earlier churches or hermitages carved into the rock. A visionary king could then have arrived, seen the potential of this sacred landscape, and launched an ambitious expansion, unifying these pre-existing elements into the grand, symbolic New Jerusalem we see today. In this scenario, King Lalibela wouldn't be the sole architect from scratch, but rather the brilliant master planner who consolidated and monumentalized a holy site, giving it its legendary name and its overarching theological structure. His 24-year reign could represent the period of its most intensive and transformative development, the time when the core vision was realized, even if the finer details took another century or more to complete. This longer, more archaeological timeline also helps explain some of the stylistic variations between the churches. Look closely, and you'll notice that not all 11 churches share the same level of architectural refinement or the same decorative motifs. Some, like the magnificent Bete Medhain Alam, show a level of complexity and a style that seems to echo the great Aksumite stelae, suggesting an earlier architectural influence. Others appear more refined or exhibit features that align with later periods. If the construction was a continuous process over several centuries, with different craftsmen and different royal patrons leaving their mark, these variations suddenly make perfect sense. The site becomes a historical palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten in stone over generations. So, where does this leave us in the great timeline debate? We are left with two powerful and not entirely incompatible truths. On one hand, we have the living tradition, a story of divine inspiration and miraculous speed that is central to the spiritual identity of Lalibela. This narrative provides a compelling origin story and underscores the site's perceived supernatural heritage. On the other hand, we have the empirical evidence of carbon dating, which suggests a slower, more organic growth, aligning with how most great religious complexes around the world actually develop, through centuries of devotion, expansion, and modification. Perhaps the most satisfying resolution is to see King Lalibela not as a mythical figure who built a city in a day, but as a historical catalyst. His vision and his royal mandate may have been the catalyst that transformed a scattered collection of holy sites into an organized, monumental pilgrimage center, a feat so impressive that it forever fused his name with the entire complex. The truth likely lies in the merging of these two narratives, a burst of inspired, centralized creation under a legendary king, built upon a foundation of older traditions and refined by the faithful hands of countless generations that followed. But the true magic of Lalibela, the element that truly makes it feel like a living, breathing world, lies beneath the surface. Beyond the towering rock-hewn churches, there exists an entire underground realm, a sprawling network of tunnels, crypts, and hidden chambers that weave the complex together into a single, interconnected spiritual universe. This isn't just a series of convenient passageways, it's a carefully choreographed landscape of faith, where every step you take is imbued with profound symbolic meaning. The tunnels vary dramatically in character. Some are wide, ceremonial processional routes, allowing groups of pilgrims to move freely between the churches. Others are so narrow and constricting that you have to turn sideways to squeeze through, their walls worn smooth by centuries of devoted hands brushing against them. And then there are those that plunge you into utter darkness, where the only way forward is to feel your way along the cold, damp rock, step by hesitant step. One of the most powerful of these passages is the dark, narrow tunnel connecting the church of Bete Mariam to the church of Bete Medhain Alam. To enter this tunnel is to participate in an ancient ritual of death and rebirth. The entrance is unassuming, but within a few steps the daylight vanishes completely, swallowed by an oppressive blackness. The air grows cool, and the sounds of the world outside fade to a distant murmur. You are left alone with the sound of your own breathing and the scuff of your feet on the stone floor. This is not an accident of design, it is the entire point. This passage is widely understood to represent the path through hell, the harrowing journey of the soul through darkness and despair before it can emerge into the light of salvation. The physical discomfort, the disorientation, the momentary fear, all of it is part of the spiritual lesson. When you finally see a pinprick of light in the distance and emerge, blinking, into the sun-drenched courtyard of another church, the experience is transformative. The relief and the sudden beauty feel like a form of grace, a physical manifestation of the promise of redemption. This is architecture that doesn't just house faith, it actively creates a religious experience for anyone who walks its path. Yet for every tunnel open to pilgrims, there are others that remain firmly sealed, guarded by the silent, watchful priests of Lalibela. This is where the mystery shifts from the symbolic to the tantalizingly concrete. Scattered throughout the complex are entrances to crypts and chambers that are strictly off-limits to the public. These are not part of the tourist trail. They are the inner sanctums, the most sacred heart of the site, and their contents are a closely guarded secret. Local tradition holds that some of these chambers contain priceless treasures, ancient manuscripts, golden crosses, and liturgical artifacts accumulated over nearly a millennium. But the most persistent and captivating rumor is that one of these hidden crypts holds the final resting place of King Lalibela himself. The official story is that his remains were moved to a church in a different region, yet many believe his bones never left the holy city that bears his name, secretly interred in a chamber known only to a select few clergy. The priests who hold the keys to these spaces are the gatekeepers of this hidden history. Their knowledge is passed down orally from generation to generation, a sacred trust. They speak of chambers that have not been entered in living memory, their original purpose is forgotten even to them. In recent years, non-invasive archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar have added fuel to this fire, suggesting the presence of large, unexplored voids and structural anomalies beneath the familiar churches. These scientific hints confirm what the legends have always said, that what we see at Lalibela is only the surface layer of a much deeper, more complex reality. Every sealed doorway is a cliffhanger, a promise of a story yet to be told. Could one of them lead to a royal tomb filled with artifacts that rewrite our understanding of the Zagwe dynasty, or perhaps to a library of ancient texts holding the original building plans? The speculation is endless, and it's this potent combination of devout secrecy and emerging scientific evidence that keeps the legend of Lalibela's hidden world so vibrantly alive. To fully appreciate the audacity of Lalibela, we need to step back and look at the powerful yet controversial dynasty that made it all possible, the Zagwe. For a long time, historical narratives painted their rule as a kind of dark age, an illegitimate interruption in the long line of Solomonic kings who traced their lineage back to the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The Zagwe were usurpers, a line of rulers from the Agor people who had seized the throne, and this lack of a direct connection to the ancient Solomonic line created a persistent crisis of legitimacy. Their entire reign was shadowed by a fundamental question: by what right did they rule God's chosen kingdom? This political vulnerability is absolutely crucial to understanding the motivation behind the Lalibela Churches. A king whose authority is constantly questioned needs a monumental achievement, something so spectacular that it silences all doubt and etches his name into history not through bloodline but through divine action. The construction of a new Jerusalem wasn't just an act of piety, it was the ultimate political masterstroke. Think of it from King Lalibela's perspective. He presided over a kingdom where powerful factions, particularly the supporters of the old Solomonic line, could challenge his rule at any moment. Building a new national pilgrimage center, one that could rival the symbolic power of the lost Jerusalem itself, would serve multiple strategic purposes at once. First, it would centralize religious power under his direct patronage. By creating a new holy city, he was effectively building a new spiritual capital, shifting the gravity of the Christian world within Ethiopia to a site that was entirely his creation. This would naturally attract pilgrims, priests, and scholars, all of whom would depend on the king's favor and in turn bolster his prestige and authority. Second, it was a powerful piece of economic and social engineering. A major pilgrimage site generates wealth, fosters trade, and unifies a population around a shared national and religious identity. By giving the Ethiopian people a new, magnificent focus for their devotion, he was forging a unified Christian identity that was intrinsically linked to the Zagwe dynasty and its most famous king. This intertwining of faith and politics is visible in the very stones of Lalibela. The entire complex can be seen as a massive piece of royal propaganda, a permanent assertion of divine favor. When a rival noble or a skeptical bishop questioned King Lalibela's right to rule, the king could point to the 11 miracles of rock surrounding them and ask, could a man without God's favor accomplish this? The sheer scale of the project demonstrated his control over vast resources and a massive labor force, proving his earthly power. Meanwhile, the divine origin story of his vision answered any challenge to his spiritual authority. It was a perfect, unassailable narrative. He wasn't just a king, he was God's chosen architect on earth. This fusion of the political and the sacred is what makes Lalibela so fascinating. It wasn't merely a sanctuary for prayer, it was the foundational project of a state designed to secure a dynasty's place in history and heaven. The brilliance of this plan lies in its lasting impact. Even after the Zagwe dynasty was eventually overthrown and the Solomonic line restored, the churches of Lalibela endured. Their spiritual power was so immense that the new rulers couldn't erase them. They could only co-opt them, weaving the site into their own historical narratives. The Zagwe may have fallen from political power, but through Lalibela, they achieved a form of immortality. Their name is forever synonymous with one of the wonders of the ancient world. This reveals a profound truth about the relationship between monumental art and political power. Palaces can be burned and statues toppled, but a work of such profound spiritual significance, one that captures the heart of a people's faith, becomes untouchable. King Lalibela's quest for legitimacy, born from political necessity, resulted in a gift to humanity that transcended its original purpose, proving that the most enduring legacies are often those built not just for a kingdom, but for the human spirit. Now, let's shift our gaze from the heavens to the earth and consider a problem as practical as it is vital: water. In the Ethiopian highlands, the seasonal rains are not a gentle mist. They are a torrential downpour that can transform dry riverbeds into raging currents in a matter of hours. For any structure carved from rock, water is the enemy. It seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, and over centuries it can shatter the hardest stone. Yet, the churches of Lalibela have not just survived these annual deluges for over 800 years. They have thrived, their interiors remaining remarkably dry and stable. This isn't a lucky accident. It is the result of one of the site's most overlooked and brilliant achievements: a masterful, hidden network of hydraulic engineering that reveals a profound understanding of the landscape itself. The builders didn't just carve churches, they sculpted an entire watershed. To see this genius in action, you need to look at the churches not as standalone buildings, but as integral parts of a meticulously engineered terrain. Take the trench surrounding the massive Bete Medhain Alam, the largest monolithic church in the world. At first glance, this deep, wide chasm appears to be a defensive moat, isolating the church and adding to its imposing grandeur. And while that symbolic function is certainly present, its primary purpose is ruthlessly practical. This trench is a colossal drainage channel, a first line of defense against the monsoon rains. The builders carved it with a precise, almost imperceptible gradient, a subtle slope that directs thousands of gallons of runoff away from the church's foundations and safely out of the complex. They didn't fight the water, they invited it in and showed it exactly where to go, turning a potential destructive force into a managed flow. This sophisticated water management extends far beyond simple trenches. If you could peel back the layers of rock, you would find a labyrinth of channels and drains carved directly into the very fabric of the churches. On the roofs of structures like Bete Mariam, you can still see intricate networks of shallow grooves. These aren't decorative, they are meticulously designed gutter systems that catch rainwater as it falls. The water is then channeled to downspouts, which are themselves carved from the living rock, funneling the flow down the sides of the churches and into a second tier of drainage. There, at ground level, another set of channels cut into the courtyard floors captures the water, guiding it into deeper subterranean conduits or out towards the Symbolic River Jordan. It's a multi-layered, gravity-fed system that operates with the elegant efficiency of a modern civil engineering project, yet it was conceived and executed centuries before the science of hydrology was formally established. The absolute pinnacle of this hydraulic artistry is found at the Church of St. George. Remember its iconic sunken form, sitting at the bottom of a deep, rectangular pit. This design is as much about water management as it is about spiritual symbolism. The entire pit acts as a massive catchment basin. The drainage system here is so precise that even during the heaviest rains, the floor of the church itself remains perfectly dry. The water collected in the pit is channeled away through a single, expertly carved outlet that leads to a deep, natural fissure in the bedrock, essentially a soakaway that drains the water deep into the earth. The builders identified a natural fault line and incorporated it into their design, using the geology of the site to their absolute advantage. This reveals a level of foresight that is staggering. They weren't just building for the present, they were engineering for millennia, anticipating the relentless cycle of seasons and the slow, persistent power of erosion. This leads to one of the most perplexing questions surrounding Lalibela. How did a society from the 12th century, with no formal scientific training, possess such an intimate and advanced knowledge of hydrology, geology, and structural engineering? The precision of their gradients, their understanding of water flow and absorption, and their ability to integrate natural landforms into their designs suggest a deep, accumulated wisdom. One compelling theory proposes that this wasn't knowledge invented on the spot, but rather inherited. The region of Ethiopia has a long and storied history of powerful kingdoms, most notably the Aksumite Empire, which flourished centuries before Lalibela. The Aksumites were master builders in their own right, erecting colossal obelisks and constructing complex palaces and dams. It is entirely plausible that the Zagwe dynasty and King Lalibela's master builders were the heirs to an ancient, unbroken tradition of stonemasonry and engineering, a school of knowledge passed down through guilds of artisans from the time of Aksum. The techniques used at Lalibela could represent the refined pinnacle of 1,000 years of African architectural experimentation. Another, more speculative line of thought looks even further back to the mysterious and largely lost civilization of the Kingdom of Damot, which existed in the region before the rise of Aksum. While we know very little about them, some researchers suggest that their technological achievements may have been far greater than currently recognized. Could the builders of Lalibela have stumbled upon or deliberately preserved fragments of an even older, more sophisticated understanding of the land? This idea of a lost civilization providing knowledge is a recurring theme in attempts to explain ancient wonders around the world. And while it remains firmly in the realm of hypothesis for Lalibela, it speaks to the profound mystery of the site's engineering. The seamless integration of the churches with their environment feels so advanced that it seems to whisper of a legacy that predates the history books. Whether the knowledge came from Aksum, a forgotten predecessor, or simply from the unparalleled genius of a single group of medieval Ethiopian engineers, the result is the same: a hydrological system of such brilliance that it has protected one of humanity's greatest architectural treasures from the elements for century after century, a silent, flowing testament to a forgotten science of and water. This profound connection to Jerusalem is the key that unlocks the entire spiritual logic of Lalibela. The layout is not a random assortment of holy buildings. It is a deliberate, meticulous recreation of the holy city of Jerusalem, transposed onto the Ethiopian landscape. The builders were not just constructing churches, they were performing an act of sacred cartography, mapping the celestial and earthly Jerusalem onto the very bedrock of their homeland. This would have required an incredibly detailed and intimate knowledge of Jerusalem's geography and its most venerated sites, a feat that seems astonishing for a civilization so geographically distant. So, how did they acquire this knowledge? The most likely explanation points to the steady stream of Ethiopian pilgrims, monks, and scholars who, for centuries before Lalibela, had been making the arduous and dangerous journey to the Holy Land. These travelers would have returned with vivid descriptions, sketches, and perhaps even written guides detailing the exact placement of sacred sites, from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to the River Jordan. This accumulated knowledge, pooled over generations, became the blueprint for the New Jerusalem in Africa. Walking through Lalibela, you are literally walking through a symbolic map of Jerusalem. The most prominent feature dividing the complex is the 30-meter-long trench known as Jordanos, the River Jordan. This isn't just a decorative channel, it is the central axis of the entire theological landscape, separating the two main clusters of churches. To the north of this symbolic river, you find the churches representing the earthly Jerusalem, the city of human history, struggle, and Christ's passion. Here, specific structures correspond directly to their counterparts in the Holy Land. For instance, a group of 3 connected chapels is identified as the Holy Trinity, while another is designated as the House of the Holy Cross, each standing in for a specific holy site a pilgrim would expect to visit in the real Jerusalem. This area was designed to guide the faithful through the physical locations of Christ's final days, allowing them to meditate on his sacrifice without ever leaving the Ethiopian highlands. South of the river, the symbolism shifts to the heavenly and the eternal. This cluster represents the heavenly Jerusalem, the divine city of God described in the book of Revelation. The churches here are often associated with themes of resurrection, salvation, and the celestial realm. The most poignant and powerful symbol in this entire southern complex is a small, unassuming cavity in the rock wall, revered as the tomb of Adam. In traditional Christian theology, particularly in the lore of Jerusalem, Adam's skull was believed to be buried at the site of Christ's crucifixion, Golgotha, symbolizing that the blood of the new Adam, Christ, redeemed the sin of the first Adam. By placing the tomb of Adam within their New Jerusalem, the builders of Lalibela were making a profound theological statement. They were physically embedding the entire arc of Christian salvation history, from the fall of man to his redemption, directly into their sacred landscape. This single feature demonstrates a level of sophisticated theological insight that goes far beyond simple imitation. It shows a deep, contextual understanding of the interconnected symbolism that gave the original Jerusalem its power. Perhaps the most architecturally explicit replica is the group of 3 chapels known collectively as Beta Golgotha. This section is one of the most sacred and restricted areas of the entire complex, accessible only to men. Within its dimly lit interior, behind a curtain, rests a pillar that tradition says bears the imprint of Christ's face, a direct parallel to the pillar of the flagellation in Jerusalem. Most compellingly, and shrouded in deepest mystery, is a small, sealed chamber inside Beta Golgotha. Local priests and tradition adamantly maintain that this chamber contains the actual tomb of Christ himself, a symbolic substitute for the edicule in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The presence of this replica tomb completes the pilgrim's symbolic journey. It means a devout Ethiopian Christian could travel to Lalibela and experience the full cycle of the Passion. They could traverse the symbolic river Jordan, pray at the site of the crucifixion on Golgotha, and finally kneel before the tomb of the resurrection, all within a single, interconnected complex. This transformed Lalibela from a mere church complex into a self-contained, fully functional pilgrimage destination of the highest order. The ultimate purpose of this grand architectural symbolism was to solve a dire spiritual and political crisis. With the fall of Jerusalem to Saladin's forces in 1187, the pilgrimage routes from Ethiopia were effectively cut off. For a kingdom that saw itself as a bastion of the true faith, this was a catastrophic blow. How could the faithful fulfill their religious duties if they could no longer reach the holiest sites in Christendom? King Lalibela's project provided the definitive answer. If the mountain would not come to Muhammad, then Jerusalem would be brought to the mountain. By creating a perfect symbolic replica, he offered his people a complete and valid alternative. A pilgrimage to Lalibela became, theologically, just as potent and meritorious as the perilous journey to the Middle East. This was an act of immense spiritual ingenuity, ensuring the continuity of their religious practice and solidifying Ethiopia's identity as a new Zion, a chosen land that now held the essence of Jerusalem within its own borders. The mystery, therefore, is not just in the how of the construction, but in the sheer intellectual and theological ambition of the vision, to capture the soul of a distant holy city and reanimate it in stone, creating a spiritual oasis that has endured for over 8 centuries. All of this leads to one of the most practical yet profound questions hanging over the entire Lalibela complex: who were the hands that did the work? We've marveled at the divine vision of the king and the genius of the engineering, but we must now confront the sheer human reality of the endeavor. If we accept even a compressed timeline like the legendary 24 years, the math becomes staggering. To excavate over 100,000 cubic meters of hard rock with simple iron tools would have required a workforce of immense size. Experts who have studied the site estimate that, at a minimum, several thousand workers would have been needed simultaneously: stonemasons, quarrymen, laborers, carpenters for scaffolding, surveyors, water carriers, and cooks, all operating in a coordinated symphony of effort. This was not a small community project. It was an undertaking on the scale of a major state enterprise, rivaling the construction of a great pyramid or a cathedral. Now imagine the logistical nightmare. We're not talking about a project in a fertile river valley with easy access to supplies. Lalibela sits in a remote, rugged highland over 2,500 meters above sea level. Feeding thousands of workers in such a location would have been a monumental challenge in itself. A steady supply chain would have been essential, with convoys of donkeys or oxen constantly bringing in grain, pulses, and other foodstuffs from the surrounding agricultural land. Water, while managed brilliantly for the structures, would have had to be provided for the workforce in massive quantities. Then there was the matter of shelter. Where did all these people live? While some may have been housed in temporary camps, the scale and duration of the work suggest the emergence of a sizable, semi-permanent settlement, a dedicated builder's city that has since vanished, its remains likely lying beneath the modern town. The organization required to sustain this population, to manage its health, resolve its disputes, and maintain its morale for years on end, reveals a level of social and administrative sophistication that is often overlooked in the shadow of the architectural wonder itself. The local religious traditions offer a beautiful and spiritually resonant answer to this problem of scale. They speak of a workforce that never slept. According to these cherished accounts, the construction was carried out in continuous shifts. Human laborers, dedicated and faithful, would toil from sunrise to sunset. Then, as darkness fell and the people rested, a host of angels would descend from the heavens, their celestial tools glowing in the night, and they would continue the work, accomplishing in the quiet hours what would take men weeks. This story of divine shift work elegantly solves the logistical puzzle by introducing a supernatural workforce, making the impossible timeline feel credible within a worldview of miracle and faith. It's a narrative that honors the human effort while acknowledging that the final result seemed to surpass what human effort alone could achieve. Historians and archaeologists, of course, look for more earthly explanations, and several compelling theories exist. One prominent idea is that the primary workforce was not composed of coerced labor, but of a vast, dedicated community of monks and skilled artisans. In medieval Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church was a central pillar of society, and monasteries were hubs of learning and craft. It is entirely plausible that a call went out to the faithful, drawing monks, priests, and devout lay artisans from across the kingdom to participate in this holy work. For these individuals, laboring on the New Jerusalem would not have been a burden, but a sacred act of devotion, a form of prayer made manifest with hammer and chisel. This would explain the incredible patience and precision evident in the carving. This was not rushed work, but a meditative, devotional practice executed with a collective spiritual focus. The workforce, in this view, was a permanent religious community, sustained by faith and the support of the royal treasury. A darker, though equally plausible, theory must also be acknowledged: the potential use of slave labor. The Zagwe dynasty, like most medieval kingdoms, would have had access to captives from military campaigns or a subjugated population. The sheer, back-breaking volume of rock removal, the initial trenching and quarrying, is the kind of work often assigned to forced labor throughout history. It is possible that a large body of slaves provided the raw muscle, the unskilled labor that isolated the great blocks of stone, while the more refined carving and detailing were reserved for the master artisans and monks. This dual-layer workforce would mirror practices seen in other ancient constructions, where a massive labor force handled the heavy lifting under the direction of a much smaller group of highly skilled technicians. Accepting this possibility adds a somber layer to the site's history, reminding us that many of the world's greatest wonders were built on foundations of human suffering, their beauty forever intertwined with sacrifice. Ultimately, the scale of the workforce tells us something crucial about the Zagwe kingdom itself. Mobilizing and sustaining thousands of people for a decades-long project demonstrates immense centralized power. It reveals a king with absolute authority over both material resources and human lives, capable of diverting a significant portion of his kingdom's productive energy away from farming and defense and into this single monumental goal. It speaks to a sophisticated administrative class that could manage supply lines, oversee specialized labor groups, and maintain order. The very existence of Lalibela is therefore a powerful testament to the organizational capacity, economic wealth, and sheer political will of a civilization that history has often overlooked. The silent, majestic churches stand as a permanent record not just of faith, but of a society capable of extraordinary collective action, a society that could bend the very mountains to its will through the coordinated effort of countless unknown hands. So if the Zagwe dynasty possessed the administrative power and the workforce, where did the actual engineering genius, the specific knowledge of how to carve a church from the top down without it collapsing, come from? To find a compelling answer, we need to rewind the clock several centuries before King Lalibela's reign to the era of the Aksumite Empire. This was a kingdom of immense power and wealth, a civilization that dominated trade routes between the Roman Empire and India, and one that left behind its own awe-inspiring monuments, the towering Aksumite obelisks. These gigantic multi-story stelae, some weighing hundreds of tons, were precisely carved from single blocks of granite and erected with a mastery that still puzzles engineers today. The connection here is crucial. The Zagwe, ruling in the same general region centuries later, were almost certainly the cultural and political heirs to the Aksumite legacy. It's not a stretch to propose that the master builders of Lalibela were working from a foundation of knowledge passed down through generations, a living tradition of stoneworking that originated in Aksum. The stylistic evidence on the ground at Lalibela strongly supports this idea of inherited technique. Look closely at the facade of the largest church, Betem Medhain Alam. Its rows of blind windows, the distinct horizontal layers that mimic multiple stories, and the overall monolithic presence bear a striking resemblance to the design of the great Aksumite stelae. It's as if the builders took the concept of a freestanding, carved obelisk and inverted the process, instead carving a building that looked like it was constructed from stacked stones, while knowing the entire thing was one solid piece. This wasn't mere imitation, it was an evolution. The Aksumites were masters of shaping and moving enormous stones. The Zagwe builders at Lalibela applied that same understanding of stone's properties and limits to a new, even more ambitious goal, not to erect but to reveal. They took the Aksumite skill in exteriors and turned it inward, mastering the art of interior space carved directly from the living rock. Furthermore, the Ethiopian highlands are dotted with examples of earlier, less complex rock-hewn structures that act as missing links in this architectural chain. Just a day's journey from Lalibela lies a site called Wakro, a church that is also carved from rock but in a much more rudimentary fashion. Further afield, the ancient town of Degum showcases tombs and early churches that demonstrate a gradual progression in skill. These sites reveal a region-wide practice of rock-cut architecture, a tradition that was being refined over centuries. In this light, Lalibela stops looking like a miraculous, sudden apparition and starts to look like a glorious culmination, the pinnacle of a long, local architectural experiment. The Zagwe dynasty, under a king of singular vision, didn't invent the technique. They simply scaled it up to a breathtaking, unprecedented level, applying the full resources of a state to a practice that local artisans had been perfecting for generations. Yet, even with this compelling theory of inherited knowledge, a significant puzzle remains. The leap from carving a simple tomb or a single nave chapel to executing the 11 churches of Lalibela is not just a step forward, it's a quantum leap. The Aksumites were brilliant at working with stone above ground. The builders of Lalibela had to solve a completely different set of problems below ground. They were working in 3 dimensions simultaneously, carving the exterior, hollowing the interior, and managing structural integrity, all while dealing with drainage, ventilation, and symbolic layout on a massive, interconnected scale. Think of the difference between a master sculptor creating a statue and a team of engineers building a subterranean city. The core principles of stonework may have been passed down, but the architectural and civil engineering concepts required for Lalibela represent a radical innovation. This is where the mystery deepens. Did a genius architect emerge from within this tradition, a figure who synthesized old knowledge into a completely new form? Or did the Zagwe court actively recruit and incorporate master builders from other regions, creating a kind of ancient think tank that combined local techniques with outside ideas to achieve the impossible? The legacy of Aksum provides a vital piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't completely solve the riddle of the sheer, explosive brilliance etched into the mountainsides of Lalibela. This intriguing possibility that foreign hands might have shaped these sacred stones brings us to one of the most captivating theories surrounding Lalibela: the potential involvement of the legendary Knights Templar. The timeline is remarkably suggestive. King Lalibela's great building project unfolded in the decades following the pivotal year of 1187, when the Muslim leader Saladin recaptured Jerusalem, sending shockwaves through the Christian world. This event directly displaced the Crusader states, including the powerful and enigmatic Knights Templar, a military order of warrior monks who had become not just formidable fighters, but also sophisticated financiers and, crucially for our story, master builders. Suddenly, these knights were without a clear mission in the Holy Land, and many scattered, their vast wealth and specialized knowledge searching for a new purpose and a new patron. It's at this exact historical crossroads that the architectural clues become so compelling. When you look closely at the detailing on churches like Betem Medhain Alam, the largest monolithic church in the world, you see features that feel strangely out of place in 12th century Ethiopia. The exterior walls are adorned with rows of blind arcades, shallow, decorative arches that serve no structural purpose but are a hallmark of European Romanesque architecture, prevalent in the great cathedrals and Templar chapels being built across France and the Holy Land around the same time. The precision of the carving, the specific style of the moldings around windows and doors, and even the layout of some interior spaces bear a stylistic resemblance that is hard to dismiss as mere coincidence. It suggests an aesthetic vocabulary that was common in the Mediterranean world, but would have been highly unusual, if not unprecedented, in the Ethiopian highlands. This isn't to say the entire design is foreign. It's a fusion, as if local architectural traditions were being interpreted or guided by someone intimately familiar with building styles from another continent. The logistical and symbolic fit also makes a strange kind of sense. The Templars were, above all, dedicated to the idea of Jerusalem. The very core of their identity was tied to protecting and venerating the holy city. When they lost it, the concept of building a new Jerusalem in a remote, powerful Christian kingdom like Ethiopia would have held immense spiritual and perhaps even strategic appeal. Offering their engineering expertise to King Lalibela could have been a way to continue their sacred mission in exile. For the king, the benefits would have been equally transformative. The Templars were at the cutting edge of military architecture and engineering. They knew how to build formidable castles, manage complex construction projects, and most importantly, they understood the principles of hydrology and stonework on a grand scale. Their knowledge could have provided the technical leap needed to execute a project of Lalibela's staggering ambition, effectively fast-tracking a process that might otherwise have taken many more generations to develop independently. Yet, for all its romantic appeal, this theory rests on a foundation of frustratingly thin historical evidence. No written records in the Vatican archives, the Templars' own meticulous ledgers, or the Ethiopian royal chronicles make any mention of a delegation of European knights arriving at the Zagwe court. The silence is deafening. Mainstream archaeology and history largely treat the idea as speculative, pointing to the robust and sophisticated indigenous building traditions we've already discussed as a far more likely explanation for Lalibela's genius. The similarities in style could be explained by a more general, indirect cultural exchange. Ethiopia had long been connected to the wider Christian world through trade routes that snaked across the Red Sea to Egypt and the Coptic Church, which itself was a repository of ancient Greco-Roman architectural knowledge. It's entirely possible that these design motifs filtered down slowly over centuries through these channels, without any direct involvement of mysterious European knights. So we are left with a historical what-if of the most tantalizing kind. The Knights Templar theory persists not because it can be proven, but because it so elegantly addresses the lingering sense of anachronism that Lalibela inspires, that feeling that the skills on display are just too advanced for their time and place. It offers a neat, human solution to the mystery of the site's engineering leaps, but perhaps its greatest value is in forcing us to reimagine the medieval world as a far more interconnected place than we often assume, where ideas, artisans, and ambitions could travel vast distances, weaving a hidden web of influence across continents. Whether the master builders were local heirs to the Aksumite legacy, enlightened monks, or exiled Templar engineers, their collective achievement stands as a monument to a moment when human ambition, fueled by unwavering faith, literally moved mountains. The stones of Lalibela hold their secret close, allowing the legend of outside help to endure as a powerful testament to the site's enduring and seemingly inexplicable wonder. Amidst the grand architecture and historical debate, there exists a living, breathing human element that has safeguarded Lalibela's soul for generations: the devoted priests of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. These men are far more than caretakers. They are the spiritual descendants of the very community that witnessed the church's creation, serving as the living memory and protectors of secrets they believe were entrusted to them by God. Their existence is one of profound devotion and asceticism. Many of these priests take vows of poverty and solitude, living in simple, rock-hewn dwellings adjacent to the churches they are assigned to protect. Their days begin before sunrise with prayers and hymns that have echoed through these stone courtyards for centuries, and their lives are dedicated to the daily rituals, fasting, and meticulous maintenance of their respective sanctuaries. To see an elderly priest, his face etched with lines of wisdom and faith, sitting in the perpetual twilight of a rock-hewn doorway, is to witness a connection to the past that is both tangible and deeply moving. They are not employees of a heritage site, they are its spiritual guardians, and they approach their duty with a solemnity that transcends tourism or archaeology. This deep, intimate connection manifests as an encyclopedic knowledge of the complex, but it is a knowledge passed down through oral tradition, not written manuals. For over 800 years, the secrets of Lalibela, the meanings of specific symbols, the locations of hidden chambers, the correct procedures for ancient rituals have been transmitted from one generation of priests to the next through whispered instruction and lived experience. A young deacon will spend decades apprenticed to an elder, learning not just the liturgy but the stories. He will be taught which tunnel leads to a forgotten crypt, which wall panel conceals a storage niche for sacred texts, and how to interpret the faint, ancient etchings that scholars struggle to decipher. This creates a fragile, unbroken chain of custodianship. There is no single, comprehensive book on the secrets of Lalibela. That book exists collectively in the minds of these devoted men. The potential loss of one elder priest without having fully transferred his knowledge is considered a spiritual catastrophe, a severing of a link to the divine origins of the site itself. When these guardians do choose to share their stories, the narratives they recount consistently reinforce the miraculous nature of Lalibela's construction. The oral histories are rich with details that amplify the legend of divine assistance. One persistent tale speaks of a magnificent, invisible canopy that was stretched over the entire work site, shielding the builders from the scorching sun and torrential rains, allowing the work to continue uninterrupted day and night. Another specific prayer, recited during important ceremonies, gives thanks not only to King Lalibela but also to the hosts of heaven, who provided the strength and the skill that mortal hands lacked. These are not seen as mere metaphors by the priests. They are historical truths integral to their understanding of why Lalibela is a holy place of unique power. For them, the question of how the churches were built is already answered. It was through the direct will of God, enacted by a righteous king and a legion of angels. This unwavering belief shapes their entire interaction with the site and with the outside world. Naturally, this profound, faith-based perspective creates a significant barrier for historians and researchers. The priests are often deeply reluctant to share certain information with outsiders, whom they may view with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Their primary duty is to protect the sanctity of the churches, not to satisfy academic curiosity. They guard their knowledge not out of spite, but out of a sacred responsibility. They may politely deflect direct questions about the construction timeline or the purpose of a sealed-off passage, steering the conversation back toward theology and legend. For a researcher seeking a technical blueprint, this can be frustrating, but it underscores a fundamental cultural divide. The priests are the keepers of a living faith, and their primary language is that of mystery and miracle, not empirical data. Gaining their trust is a slow, delicate process that requires demonstrating genuine respect for their traditions, not just a desire to extract information. This carefully maintained secrecy extends to the most sacred spaces within the complex. While tourists marvel at the main halls, the priests know of sub-chambers and crypts that are never open for public view. These are the inner sanctums where the most revered artifacts are believed to be stored: ancient manuscripts on goat-skin parchment, heavy gold and silver processional crosses, and liturgical objects that date back to the earliest days of the church. The most compelling secret whispered among the faithful is the location of King Lalibela's true tomb. While official history states his remains were moved, a strong oral tradition insists he is buried in a hidden chamber somewhere within the complex, a secret known only to a select few high-ranking clerics. This isn't just a historical claim, it's a statement of continuous sacred guardianship. The king's spirit, they believe, has never left the New Jerusalem he created, and it is their eternal duty to watch over his resting place. In the modern era, this ancient system of oral tradition faces unprecedented challenges. The world is encroaching on Lalibela as never before, with the pressures of tourism, climate change, and global connectivity testing the boundaries of this secluded community. Younger generations of Ethiopians, while deeply faithful, are also part of a more connected, fast-paced world, and the patient, decade-long apprenticeship required to become a guardian priest may hold less appeal. The very act of writing down the oral histories while potentially preserving them is also viewed by some traditionalists as a dilution of their sacred power. The knowledge is meant to be lived and breathed, not simply read. The guardians of Lalibela stand at a crossroads, striving to protect the mystical heart of their faith while navigating a world that increasingly demands tangible, verifiable answers. They remain the human key to the mystery, a living library whose most valuable volumes are written not on parchment, but in memory and spirit, ensuring that the secret of Lalibela's divine origin continues to echo through the stone passages for generations to come. Beyond the intricate carvings and the masterful engineering, there lies a hidden layer of complexity that speaks to a profound understanding of the cosmos itself. The builders of Lalibela may have been looking not just to the earth and the heavens for divine inspiration, but to the very movements of the stars and the sun, encoding a celestial calendar into the very orientation of their churches. This idea moves us from the realm of earthly construction into the sophisticated world of archaeoastronomy, suggesting the architects possessed a knowledge of the skies that seems remarkably advanced for their time. Consider the sheer scale of Beit Medhain Alam, the largest monolithic church in the world. Its main axis is not aligned randomly. It is oriented on a specific east-west bearing, an alignment that resonates with deep symbolic meaning in Christian tradition, where the east represents the direction of the rising sun and, by extension, the resurrection of Christ. But what if this alignment was more than just symbolic? What if it was designed to capture a specific, fleeting moment of light? This leads us to a compelling theory regarding specific feast days in the Ethiopian Orthodox calendar. Researchers have noted that on important holy days, such as the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, the rising sun could potentially cast its rays through a strategically placed window or doorway in a church like Beit Medhain Alam, illuminating a particular altar, cross, or symbolic mark within the dark interior. Such an effect would transform the church from a static building into a dynamic instrument of worship, a place where the divine was made manifest annually through a shaft of celestial light. This is not merely an aesthetic choice, it is a form of theological technology, a way of binding the cycles of the church to the immutable cycles of the universe, demonstrating a harmony between faith and the natural order. To achieve this, the builders needed more than just architectural skill. They required precise astronomical observation over many years to plot the sun's changing path across the horizon with incredible accuracy. The implications of such precise alignments are staggering. It suggests the existence of a class of astronomer priests within the Zagwe court, individuals who could track solstices, equinoxes, and the gradual precession of the stars. Where did this knowledge come from? One fascinating possibility points to the long-standing cultural and religious exchanges between Ethiopia and the Coptic Church of Egypt. Ancient Egypt was, of course, a civilization renowned for its celestial observations, with temples famously aligned to stellar events. This knowledge could have traveled south along the Nile and across the Red Sea, merging with local Ethiopian traditions to create a unique hybrid of architectural and astronomical science. Alternatively, this could represent an indigenous development, a knowledge system honed over centuries by Ethiopian scholars observing the clear, high-altitude skies of their homeland, meticulously recording the movements of heavenly bodies and passing this data down through generations of builders. Yet, we must also approach these theories with a healthy degree of caution. The field of archaeoastronomy is often fraught with the temptation to see intentional alignments in every ancient structure. A window that catches the sunrise on a specific day could be a deliberate design feature, or it could be a fortunate coincidence, its significance assigned by later generations seeking deeper meaning. The line between symbolic intention and literal astronomical function can be blurry. For instance, an Eastern orientation is a widespread feature in Christian church architecture, representing the anticipation of Christ's return, the dayspring from on high. This powerful symbolism alone could explain the general alignment without requiring a complex, specific solar calendar. The true genius of Lalibela may lie in this beautiful ambiguity, where the architecture works on multiple levels simultaneously, serving both as a grand symbolic statement and potentially as a precise celestial observatory. This celestial dimension adds a breathtaking new layer to our appreciation of the intellectual prowess behind Lalibela. It forces us to expand our definition of the master builders beyond stonemasons and engineers to include scholars and astronomers. If these alignments are indeed intentional, then the entire complex was not just a map of Jerusalem, but a mirror of the heavens, a sacred landscape where the rhythms of worship were synchronized with the cosmic dance of the sun and stars. This transforms Lalibela from a monumental construction project into a profound philosophical statement, a declaration that the divine order could be found not only in scripture and stone, but also in the precise, predictable, and beautiful motion of the celestial spheres, a secret written in sunlight and shadow that continues to reveal itself once every year. But the mystery of Lalibela is not confined to its grand exteriors and hidden tunnels. It also whispers from the very walls within the churches themselves. Step inside one of these hallowed spaces, and your eyes slowly adjust to the dim, candlelit interior, revealing a world of color and story that has endured for centuries. Here, covering the walls and ceilings, are fading yet still breathtaking medieval frescoes. These are not mere decorations, they are a visual Bible, a theological narrative painted in ochre, red, black, and white, designed to educate and inspire a largely illiterate population. The scenes are dominated by powerful depictions of biblical stories and revered saints, each figure rendered with a distinct, expressive style. You'll find the serene face of the Virgin Mary, the stern majesty of Christ Pantocrator ruling from the dome, and dramatic tableaus of the crucifixion and the lives of the apostles. The very presence of these paintings adds another profound layer to the site's construction story, suggesting that the artistic embellishment was an integral part of the sacred mission, continuing long after the last stone was carved. The stylistic details of these frescoes provide a fascinating puzzle for art historians, offering tantalizing clues about the web of cultural exchange in the medieval world. While the overall composition is unmistakably Ethiopian, with its characteristic large, expressive eyes and frontal, hieratic poses, experts have detected subtle foreign influences woven into the artistic fabric. Some figures display the graceful, flowing lines reminiscent of Byzantine art, a style that dominated the Eastern Christian world. Others show hints of Coptic Egyptian motifs, particularly in the intricate geometric patterns that frame the holy figures. This stylistic fusion suggests that Lalibela was not an isolated hermitage but a vibrant crossroads. It's highly plausible that the Zagwe court attracted not just builders, but also iconographers and manuscript illustrators from across the Christian world, creating a melting pot of artistic traditions where local masters blended outside influences with their own deeply rooted aesthetic to create something entirely unique. The walls themselves, therefore, act as a silent historical record of a kingdom that was connected to a much wider, sophisticated network of faith and culture. Among the most revered artifacts held within these rock-hewn sanctuaries is the legendary Lalibela cross, a masterpiece of medieval African metalwork. Crafted from solid gold and measuring nearly 60 centimeters in length, its intricate design is a testament to an extraordinarily high level of artisan skill. The cross is not a simple symbol. It is a dense tapestry of filigree and symbolism, with its arms ending in elaborate, splayed patterns that some interpret as representing the wings of angels. The local faithful hold a profound belief that this cross possesses miraculous properties, crediting it with healing powers and considering it the most sacred object in the entire complex. Its very existence raises compelling questions about the wealth and resources available to the Zagwe dynasty. Creating such an object required not only immense spiritual devotion but also access to gold, likely traded from the southern regions of the empire, and the services of goldsmiths whose technical prowess rivaled anything found in contemporaneous Europe or the Middle East. The cross is a powerful, gleaming symbol of a kingdom at the peak of its power and artistic achievement. Yet, the preservation of these delicate paintings and precious artifacts in the harsh Ethiopian highland environment is a mystery all its own. The interiors of the churches are subjected to dramatic shifts in temperature and humidity, not to mention the constant threat of soot from centuries of candle smoke and the subtle, insidious damage from dust and fungal spores. The fact that any color remains on these walls after 800 years feels like a minor miracle. The secret to their survival lies partly in the innate properties of the rock itself, which provides a stable, breathable surface, and partly in the ancient techniques used by the artists. They employed natural, mineral-based pigments that bond deeply with the stone, creating a far more durable finish than later organic paints would have. Furthermore, the very darkness of the interiors, while challenging for visitors, has acted as a natural shield, protecting the pigments from the fading power of direct sunlight. This ongoing battle against decay is a quiet, constant struggle that the guardian priests have waged for generations, preserving this fragile heritage with a devotion that is itself a form of living art. But perhaps the most tantalizing secrets of all are locked away in the form of ancient manuscripts, carefully guarded within the dark, cool recesses of the church's inner sanctuaries. These are not ordinary books. They are precious scents, massive volumes with pages made from treated goat skin parchment, bound between heavy wooden covers often adorned with carved crosses or protective metal plates. Written in the ancient liturgical language of Jais, These manuscripts contain psalms, gospels, and theological commentaries, but they also hold the potential for something far more revolutionary: contemporary accounts of the construction of Lalibela itself. Imagine the possibility that one of these untranslated or inaccessible volumes contains a chronicle written by a royal scribe or the master architect, detailing the day-to-day challenges, the number of workers, the sequence of construction, or even the specific techniques used to carve the rock. Such a discovery would be the holy grail of Lalibela studies, a first-hand narrative that could finally pierce the veil of legend surrounding the site's creation. The reality, however, is that accessing this potential treasure trove of information is incredibly difficult. Many of the most ancient and fragile manuscripts are considered so sacred that they are rarely, if ever, shown to outsiders. They are brought out only for the most important religious festivals, wrapped in layers of protective cloth, treated with the same reverence as a holy relic. This creates a profound dilemma for historians. The very faith that has preserved these documents for centuries also makes them nearly impossible to study using modern scientific methods. Carbon dating a parchment fragment or performing multispectral imaging to reveal faded text requires a level of access and handling that the guardian priests are often unwilling to grant, fearing desecration or damage. This means that a vast repository of historical data remains locked away, its secrets preserved by tradition but hidden from the analytical tools that could decipher them. The potential knowledge contained within these pages hangs in a delicate balance between preservation and discovery, a silent conversation between faith and science that has yet to be resolved. So we are left with a profound juxtaposition. On one hand, the vibrant public art of the frescoes speaks to the community's shared faith, a story told in color for all to see. On the other, the sealed manuscripts represent the hidden, textual knowledge, guarded and mysterious. Together, they form the complete intellectual and spiritual legacy of Lalibela. The paintings show us the divine stories that inspired the builders and continue to inspire worshippers. The manuscripts hold the potential to reveal the how, the human story of its creation. Until those pages are fully studied, the written history of this wonder remains a story half told, a final chapter kept in the dark, waiting for the day when the right key turns the lock and the whispers of the past can finally be heard aloud. In recent decades, the whispering legends of Lalibela have been met with the silent, probing gaze of modern science. Archaeological teams, armed with technologies once unimaginable, have descended upon the holy city not to disprove the stories but to map the truth hidden within the stone. One of the most revelatory tools has been ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses of energy deep into the earth, painting a picture of what lies beneath the surface without moving a single stone. These scans have confirmed long-held theories about the builders' methods, revealing the ghostly outlines of massive quarrying trenches and proving that the initial phase involved isolating those gigantic blocks of rock with astonishing precision. The radar didn't just confirm the scale, it revealed a hidden world of previously unknown tunnels and voids, a subterranean network even more extensive than what is visible to pilgrims today, suggesting that the complex we can walk through is merely the tip of a vast underground iceberg. Alongside this subterranean mapping, the painstaking technique of laser scanning has brought a new level of clarity to the churches themselves. By bathing every surface in millions of laser points, researchers have created digital twins of the structures with millimeter accuracy. This has allowed them to analyze the tool marks left by the ancient workers, revealing the specific angles and techniques of their chisels. The scans show a remarkable consistency in the workmanship, indicating a highly organized labor force operating under a unified set of instructions. Furthermore, this technology has documented the subtle, yet critical, drainage channels and roof slopes with exacting detail, proving that the water management system was not an afterthought but an integral part of the initial design, engineered with a foresight that continues to baffle modern engineers. Perhaps the most paradigm-shifting scientific evidence has come from something as humble as mortar. While the primary structures are monolithic, mortar was used to set decorative elements, seal cracks, and in later modifications. By subjecting these mortar samples to radiocarbon dating, scientists have been able to pull absolute dates from the very fabric of the site. The results were a stunning challenge to the singular legend of King Lalibela. Instead of clustering neatly within a tight 24-year window in the late 12th century, the dates sprawled across a much broader timeline from as early as the 10th century to as late as the 15th. This carbon evidence powerfully suggests that Lalibela was not a project with a single start and finish date, but a living, evolving sacred site. It points toward a long process of phased development, where a visionary king like Jeba Meskel Lalibela may have arrived and launched an ambitious, unifying expansion of a site that already held spiritual significance, consolidating older chapels and hermitages into the grand, New Jerusalem we recognize today. Yet, for all the revelations that science has provided, it has also meticulously drawn a boundary around what it cannot explain. The carbon dating may suggest a longer timeline, but it does nothing to diminish the sheer, awe-inspiring speed at which the core of the complex must have been realized under a concentrated royal effort. Carving the central churches like Bete Medhain Alam and Bete Mariam still represents a pace of construction that seems almost superhuman, even over a 50-year period. Science can map the tool marks, but it cannot name the hands that held them. The identity of the master architect, the brilliant mind behind the overall plan, and the sophisticated engineering solutions remains completely unknown, lost to a history that preferred to record the glory of kings rather than the genius of craftsmen. Most intriguingly, science has been utterly silent on the source of the advanced planning knowledge. The ground-penetrating radar can show us the voids, but it cannot tell us how the builders acquired their profound understanding of hydrology, structural integrity, and celestial alignment. The laser scans can record the perfect angles of a window, but they cannot reveal the origin of the architectural style that so curiously blends Aksumite tradition with what appear to be foreign influences. The core mystery of Lalibela was never just about moving rock, it was about the flow of ideas. Where did the blueprint for this New Jerusalem come from? Was it a sudden, divine vision, as the legends insist? Was it the culmination of 1,000 years of indigenous African architectural experimentation now lost to us? Or was it knowledge imported from afar, carried by Coptic Egyptians, or even, as some speculate, by exiled Templar knights? On these most captivating questions, the stones, even under the most intense scientific scrutiny, remain stubbornly and profoundly silent, reminding us that some wonders are built not just to be solved, but to be wondered at. All of these secrets, however, are locked in a fragile and relentless race against time. For centuries, the soft volcanic rock, known as tuff, from which the churches are carved, has been under constant assault from the very elements it was so brilliantly designed to manage. The same seasonal rains that the ancient drainage channels divert are now a primary agent of decay. Water seeps into microscopic cracks, and during cold nights it freezes and expands, a process called freeze-thaw cycling that slowly but inexorably prizes the stone apart grain by grain. This natural erosion has been dramatically accelerated by a far more modern force, the sheer volume of human feet. In recent decades, Lalibela has transformed from a remote pilgrimage site into a major global tourist destination. While this brings vital economic resources, the constant tread of thousands of visitors each year wears down the soft stone floors, destabilizes delicate structures, and introduces new vibrations and humidity into the ancient spaces. The very act of admiring this wonder is tragically contributing to its gradual disappearance. In response to this crisis, a massive international preservation effort has been mobilized, spearheaded by organizations like UNESCO, which designated Lalibela a World Heritage Site in 1978. The Ethiopian government, in partnership with international experts, has launched numerous conservation projects aimed at stabilizing the structures. These are not simple repairs, they are complex engineering challenges that require a deep understanding of the original construction. Teams of geologists, engineers, and stonemasons work to inject specialized grouts into cracks to stabilize them, replace damaged sections with compatible stone, and reinforce vulnerable pillars and arches from within. The work is painstaking and slow, often more akin to microsurgery than construction, as conservators must make every intervention reversible, adhering to the principle that future generations with better technology should be able to undo their work if necessary. It's a delicate dance of using modern science to protect ancient genius without overwriting the original masterpiece. The most visible and controversial of these preservation measures has been the installation of giant, custom-built protective shelters over several of the key churches, including the iconic Bete Medhain Alam. These vast, white structures, which from a distance look like something between a circus tent and a modern aviation hangar, were erected to shield the churches from the direct impact of rain and sun. Proponents argue that this is a necessary, pragmatic solution. The shelters act as a giant umbrella, intercepting the destructive rainfall before it can even touch the stone, thereby dramatically slowing the rate of erosion. They see it as a temporary life support system, buying precious decades for conservators to develop more permanent and less intrusive solutions, effectively creating a controlled climate for the vulnerable monuments. However, this well-intentioned intervention has sparked a fierce ethical debate that strikes at the very heart of what it means to preserve a heritage site. Critics, including many architects, historians, and local clergy, argue that these shelters fundamentally alter the spiritual and aesthetic experience of Lalibela. The churches were designed to exist in harmony with their natural environment, to feel the sun warm the pink stone, to hear the rain channeled away by ancient gutters, to witness the shadows change with the passing day. Placing them under a canopy, critics say, museumizes them, severing that sacred connection to the sky and the elements. It transforms a living, breathing place of worship into a curated exhibit, potentially diminishing the profound sense of awe that has defined the pilgrim experience for 800 years. This creates a painful dilemma. Is it better to preserve the physical fabric of the churches even if it means compromising the intangible spirit of the place? Or should we risk their gradual decay to maintain their authentic relationship with the world? This ongoing battle between preservation and authenticity adds a powerful, urgent dimension to our quest to understand how Lalibela was built. The better we comprehend the original engineering, the specific type of rock, the exact gradient of the drainage channels, the structural logic of the pillars, the more effectively we can protect it. Modern laser scans and 3D models are not just academic exercises. They are becoming essential blueprints for conservation, allowing experts to monitor minute changes and predict future points of failure. The ancient builders' secrets are no longer just a historical curiosity. They are critical data for 21st century survival. The fragile reality of the stone forces us to confront a sobering truth. The same forces of time and nature that have hidden the answers for so long are now actively erasing them. The race to decode Lalibela is not just about satisfying our curiosity about the past. It is a crucial mission to ensure that this whispering wonder does not fall silent for future generations, and that the hands that work to save it today are guided by an understanding of the brilliant hands that first carved it from the mountain. To truly grasp the singularity of Lalibela, it helps to view it not in isolation, but as part of a global family of rock-hewn marvels. When we place it alongside two other legendary sites, the rose-red city of Petra in Jordan and the magnificent Ellora caves in India, we begin to see both a shared human impulse and the distinct, almost otherworldly, qualities that set the Ethiopian wonder apart. The most fundamental similarity lies in the core technique. the breathtakingly audacious process of carving structures directly into the living rock, working from the top down. At Petra, the Nabateans sculpted their majestic treasury and tombs by descending the cliff face, starting with the elaborate pediments and statues at the top and working their way downward to create grand portals. Similarly, at Ellora, Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain monks meticulously excavated the mountainside from the top, carving inward to create entire monasteries and temples, complete with intricate pillars and sculpted deities, all from a single, continuous piece of stone. This shared reverse methodology is a testament to a universal architectural courage, a willingness to approach a mountain not as an obstacle, but as a raw block of marble containing a masterpiece waiting to be revealed. Yet, this is where the profound differences begin, and they reveal why Lalibela occupies such a unique tier of achievement. Consider the final form. The most iconic structures at Petra, like Al-Kosne, the treasury, are essentially magnificent facades carved into a cliff wall. They are deeply impressive, but they are primarily fronts for chambers carved into the mountain behind them. They are part of the rock face itself. Ellora, for all its staggering complexity, follows a similar principle. The breathtaking Kailasa Temple, the world's largest monolithic structure, was carved by excavating a colossal trench around a central block of volcanic rock. But the temple itself remains connected to the surrounding cliff at its base. It is a structure freed from the top and sides, yet still anchored to the earth below. Lalibela, by stunning contrast, took this concept a radical step further. Here, the builders didn't just carve facades or temples connected to a mountain. They created completely free-standing monolithic churches. This is a critical distinction that cannot be overstated. The churches of Lalibela are not attached to the plateau they were carved from. They are isolated, fully three-dimensional buildings surrounded on all sides by deep trenches and courtyards. Imagine the Church of St. George. It is a perfect freestanding cross, entirely detached from the earth around it, connected to the world only by a narrow, tunneled entrance. This required a far more complex and perilous engineering process. The builders had to calculate the structural integrity of the entire block from every angle, ensuring that once the supporting rock was removed, the church would not only stand but remain stable for centuries. This transforms the achievement from magnificent rock sculpture into a form of architectural birth, where a complete, complex building was literally liberated from the stone that once encased it. The level of planning, the understanding of load and stress, and the sheer nerve required for this surpasses even the awe-inspiring work at Petra and Ellora, pushing Lalibela into a category of its own. The purpose and symbolism behind these sites further highlight their unique characters. Petra was a thriving Nabatean trade hub, a city of the living where the rock-cut facades served as tombs and public buildings, blending Hellenistic and Eastern influences to project power and wealth to passing caravans. Ellora was a sprawling monastic university, a place of retreat and intense theological debate where the rock-cut temples served as meditative spaces for multiple faiths, their walls telling the stories of Buddha, Shiva, and Mahavira. Lalibela's purpose, however, was singular and spiritually profound. It was conceived as a functional New Jerusalem, an active pilgrimage center designed to replicate the entire holy city for a Christian kingdom in crisis. This wasn't just about creating spaces for worship, it was about creating a symbolic landscape for a spiritual journey. The layout, with its symbolic river Jordan and clusters representing the earthly and heavenly Jerusalems, along with its network of tunnels representing the path through hell to salvation, creates a theological map that is utterly unique in the world of rock-cut architecture. The precision required to execute this divine blueprint, encoding such complex Christian symbolism into the very topography, adds a layer of intellectual and spiritual ambition not found in its global counterparts. When we examine scale and artistry, the comparison becomes not about which is greater, but about the different kinds of genius on display. Petra's grandeur is in its vast, sprawling necropolis and its integration with a natural canyon, a city carved over centuries by a mercantile empire. Ellora's wonder lies in the sheer density of its sculpture and the sheer volume of rock removed to create the Kailasa Temple, a project of staggering devotion. Lalibela's mastery, however, is one of concentrated, refined precision on an equally massive scale. The 11 churches, while fewer in number than Ellora's 34 caves, represent a more unified and architecturally sophisticated vision. The builders achieved a level of finish and detail: the perfectly smooth walls, the intricately carved windows mimicking Aksumite woodwork, the flawless geometric forms. That gives the site a sense of both monumental power and delicate artistry. It is this combination, the global rarity of free-standing monolithic construction, the complex Christian cosmography, and the breathtaking precision, that solidifies Lalibela's status as one of humanity's most enigmatic and unparalleled architectural achievements, a secret written in stone that continues to challenge our understanding of the ancient world's capabilities. Yet, if you stand in the dusty courtyard of Bete Mariam during the pre-dawn hours of Timkat, the Ethiopian celebration of Epiphany, you will witness a dimension of Lalibela that no carbon date or laser scan can ever capture. The air is thick with incense and the resonant, ancient chants of thousands of pilgrims, their white-clad bodies pressed together in a single, swaying sea of devotion. As the procession of priests emerges from the darkness bearing the sacred tabots or replicas of the Ark of the Covenant high above their heads, the energy is electric, palpable. In this moment, for the faithful, the churches are not 800-year-old historical artifacts. They are living, breathing vessels of God's grace, their very stones sanctified by the belief that they were forged not by human ambition alone but by celestial hands. This unwavering faith is not just a backdrop to the mystery of Lalibela. It is the very heart of its enduring power, a force that challenges our modern, empirical worldview by offering a truth that is felt, not proven. For the priests who have dedicated their lives to these sanctuaries and for the pilgrims who journey here from remote villages, the question of how the churches were built was settled centuries ago. The intricate royal chronicles and the vibrant oral traditions do not speak of workforce logistics or phased construction. They tell of a king chosen by God who received the architectural plans directly from heaven and was aided by a legion of angels who worked through the night. This narrative is not a symbolic folktale to them. It is recorded history. To suggest that human ingenuity alone could account for Lalibela is, in their view, to miss the entire point. The miracle is the proof of its holiness. The sheer impossibility of the task by conventional means is, for the believer, the very evidence of divine intervention. This creates a fascinating intellectual standoff. A scientist might point to the radiocarbon dates spanning centuries, but a priest will point to the seamless walls of Bete Georges and ask simply, "Can you make this?" In the face of such a question, even the most detailed engineering theory can feel like an abstraction, unable to compete with the visceral, awe-inspiring reality of the stone itself. This faith-based perspective fundamentally reframes the purpose of the entire complex. From a scientific or historical viewpoint, Lalibela is a monumental engineering achievement and a clever political tool for securing a dynasty's legacy. But through the lens of belief, it is none of those things. It is a gift. It is a tangible act of God's mercy, provided to His faithful people in a time of crisis when the road to Jerusalem was closed. The angels who carved the rock were not just helping with construction. They were participating in a divine act of creation, making the site itself a relic of a moment when the veil between heaven and earth was torn open. This is why the scientific debate over 24 years versus 200 years is largely irrelevant within the church compound. Time is a human constraint for God, and for a miracle, time is meaningless. The longer timeline proposed by archaeologists doesn't disprove the miracle. It merely extends the period during which the divine was manifest in the world, making the sustained collective faith that built and maintained the site over generations a kind of miracle in itself. The power of this belief becomes most concentrated during the great festivals, which transform Lalibela from a static site into a pulsating, living scripture. Timkat is the most spectacular example. The entire complex becomes a stage for a sacred drama. Pilgrims reenact the baptism of Christ in the symbolic river Jordan, not as a simple remembrance, but as a participatory event where the Holy Spirit is believed to be truly present and active. When you see an elderly woman, her face etched with a lifetime of struggle, reach out to touch the wall of Betem Medhain Alam with tear-filled eyes, she is not admiring the craftsmanship. She is connecting with the divine. She is touching a stone that she believes was shaped by an angel's hand. This emotional, spiritual connection is a form of knowing that operates on a different plane than academic knowledge. It offers a profound sense of certainty and peace that no shifting archaeological theory, based on new evidence or a new mortar sample, can ever provide. For millions, this spiritual satisfaction is infinitely more valuable than any scientific explanation. This creates a beautiful and necessary tension at the heart of any attempt to solve the secret of Lalibela. The relentless human drive to investigate, to date, and to analyze is pitted against a serene, unshakable certainty that the answer has been known all along. The two narratives, the scientific and the spiritual, do not cancel each other out. Instead, they exist in a parallel dance, each offering its own kind of truth. One seeks to understand the hands that held the chisels, while the other venerates the divine will that guided them. Perhaps the ultimate secret of Lalibela is not how it was built, but why it continues to captivate us so completely. It stands as a permanent invitation to wonder, a bridge between the measurable world of physics and the immeasurable realm of spirit. In an age dominated by data and skepticism, Lalibela offers a sanctuary for mystery, reminding us that some of humanity's greatest achievements were born not from a need to simply solve problems, but from a deep, unquenchable longing to touch the divine, a longing so powerful it can, against all odds, convince a mountain to become a cathedral. One of the most intriguing details you'll notice as you walk among the churches of Lalibela is something that at first seems like a paradox. Scattered across the majestic facades are countless doors and windows, beautifully carved with intricate frames and crosses, yet they lead nowhere. Push against them and they won't budge. They are solid rock, permanently sealed shut. These are not entrances or sources of light, but what we call false or blind features. In our modern, utilitarian world, this can seem baffling. Why would master builders, engaged in one of the most labor-intensive projects in history, spend precious time and energy carving features that serve no practical function? The answer lies in a world where every chisel strike was an act of devotion, and the physical structure was merely the vessel for a far deeper spiritual reality. These fake doors and windows were not architectural mistakes. They were theological statements, essential components of a celestial blueprint. To understand their purpose, you have to step into the mindset of the medieval Ethiopian Christian. For them, a church was not just a building for gathering. It was a microcosm of the universe, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The very architecture was a form of scripture, written in stone instead of ink. In this symbolic language, a door represents a passage, a transition from one state of being to another. The Bible is filled with references to gates and doors, most powerfully in the words of Christ in the Gospel of John, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved." The physical doors that you can actually walk through in Lalibela symbolized Christ as the gateway to salvation for the living congregation. But the false doors, they represented something even more profound, the doors to heaven itself, or the portals to the spiritual realm, which are perpetually closed to mortal beings in this life. They were a constant physical reminder that the ultimate entry into God's kingdom is not a physical act, but a spiritual one, granted through grace and not by human effort. This symbolic intention becomes even clearer when you examine the specific placement of these blind features. They are often found on the western walls of the churches. In traditional Christian architecture, the West is symbolically associated with the setting sun, with death, and with the end of time. The main functional entrance was typically on the north or south side, guiding the living faithful into the space of worship. But the false door on the west wall served a different, more esoteric purpose. It was sometimes called the Door of the Dead or the Celestial Gate, representing the passage through which the souls of the righteous would eventually enter paradise at the end of days. During funeral rites, the coffin might be symbolically carried towards this false door, enacting the soul's journey towards the heavenly Jerusalem, a powerful ritual that used the architecture to make an abstract hope tangibly present. It was a piece of stagecraft built directly into the stone, ensuring that the theology of death and resurrection was woven into the very fabric of the church. The windows, too, carried a heavy symbolic load. A real window lets in physical light, but a false window was a declaration that a different kind of illumination was at work. It represented the light of God, the uncreated light of divine wisdom that transcends the sun and the moon. Many of these blind windows are carved in a style that mimics the famous Aksumite windows with their intricate woven cross patterns. This design, known as a star window, was itself a symbol of Christ, the bright morning star. By carving these false windows, the builders were stating that the true light illuminating this sacred space was not from the outside world, but from the Holy Spirit within. It was an architectural confession of faith, a way of saying that the church's ultimate reality was not the volcanic rock you could touch, but the invisible spiritual kingdom it pointed towards. The priority was not on creating a well-lit interior in the modern sense, but on creating a theologically accurate representation of the heavenly realm. This incredible investment of effort into non-functional details tells us something crucial about the master builders and their patron, King Lalibela. Their priorities were fundamentally different from those of a modern architect. For them, structural integrity and symbolic accuracy were two sides of the same sacred coin. A church that was physically sound but theologically incomplete would have been a failure. The divine vision, as the legends describe it, included every last symbolic detail. To omit the false doors and windows would be to disobey the celestial blueprint to build a shell without a soul. The labor required to carve these features was not seen as wasted time. It was an essential part of the devotional act, a form of prayer made manifest. The patience and skill required to perfectly sculpt a solid rock facade to look exactly like a functioning one demonstrates a level of commitment that goes far beyond mere construction. It was an act of worship, a physical meditation on a spiritual truth. This obsession with symbolic precision ultimately reinforces the theory that the entire complex was guided by a meticulously detailed plan, one that was as much a theological document as it was an architectural one. The layout of the New Jerusalem, the orientation of the churches, the network of tunnels representing the path through hell, and these countless false doors and windows all point to a single, overarching vision. It suggests the presence of a master architect or a council of theologians and builders who possessed a comprehensive understanding of both engineering and scripture. They weren't just building structures, they were translating an entire cosmology into stone. The fake doors are a small but powerful piece of evidence that the secret to Lalibela lies not in a single lost technology, but in a lost way of thinking, a world view where the physical and spiritual worlds were intimately connected, and where the most important realities were the ones that could never be seen with the naked eye, only believed in and carved into rock as a testament to that faith. Now let's step out of the bright sunlight and into the cool, shadowy interior of one of these ancient sanctuaries, and prepare to experience the mystery of Lalibela not just with your eyes but with your ears. Inside the rock-hewn churches, the air feels different, thicker, almost charged. It's a quiet so profound that you can hear the soft scuff of your own feet on the stone floor. But when that silence is broken, something magical happens. As a priest begins a low chant, the sound doesn't just travel, it unfolds. A single voice can seem to fill the entire space, swelling and lingering, as if the very walls are joining in the prayer. This is the auditory dimension of Lalibela, a sensory marvel that many visitors say is just as breathtaking as the visual spectacle. The resonance inside these monolithic chambers is unlike anything in a conventional building. It's not an echo that simply repeats. It's a sustained, enveloping resonance that makes chants and drumbeats feel alive, giving them a rich, otherworldly quality that seems to vibrate right through you. This phenomenon leads to a compelling question that has intrigued both acousticians and historians. Was this incredible sound a happy accident of the carving process, or was it a deliberate feature, meticulously engineered by the builders? The sheer physical properties of the churches suggest that accident alone is an unlikely explanation. Remember, each church was hollowed out from a single, massive block of volcanic rock. This isn't a structure built with separate materials that can create sound-deadening gaps. It is a continuous, solid stone vessel. The walls, floors, and ceilings are all fused together, creating a hard, reflective surface with very few soft materials to absorb sound waves. When a sound is generated inside, the waves bounce and reverberate between these dense, smooth surfaces for an extended period, creating that characteristic heavenly sustain. The specific dimensions and shapes of the interiors further refine this effect. Many of the churches feature high, vaulted ceilings and long, rectangular naves. These classic forms are known in acoustic science to support distinct resonant frequencies, effectively turning the entire room into a giant stone musical instrument, perfectly tuned to amplify the human voice and the rhythmic cadence of liturgical prayer. When you listen to the priests sing the ancient jazz liturgy today, you are hearing the result of a design that seems perfectly tailored for their specific form of worship. The slow, melismatic chants, with their long, held notes and intricate melodic patterns, are magnified and enriched by the space. A single syllable can hang in the air for seconds, blending with the notes that follow to create a complex, overlapping tapestry of sound that feels both immense and intimate. This acoustic environment would have been profoundly effective for a medieval congregation. In an era without microphones or amplifiers, ensuring that the sacred words could be heard clearly by everyone in a large, dark, and crowded space was a monumental challenge. The natural amplification provided by the stone solved this problem beautifully. More than that, it transformed the act of worship into an immersive, multi-sensory experience. The sound itself became a tool for spiritual transcendence, its physical impact on the body. The way you can feel the vibrations in your chest mirroring the intended spiritual impact on the soul. This level of sophistication suggests the builders possessed an intuitive, if not calculated, understanding of how sound behaves. They may not have had the mathematical formulas of modern acoustics, but they were master observers. They likely understood through generations of trial and error, or perhaps through a brilliant moment of insight, that certain shapes and surface textures produced a more desirable sound. They might have carved test pits or smaller chambers first, learning how to control reverberation. The smoothness of the walls is particularly critical. A rough, uneven surface would scatter sound waves chaotically, creating a muddy, indistinct noise. The remarkably finished, planar surfaces found throughout Lalibela, however, reflect sound in a more coherent and predictable way, ensuring clarity even within the powerful reverberation. It points to a holistic approach to design, where the auditory experience was considered just as important as the visual and symbolic aspects of the church, all working in concert to create a complete environment for encountering the divine. Of course, not everyone is convinced this was a deliberate feat of engineering. The skeptical viewpoint argues that the remarkable acoustics are simply a fortunate byproduct of the chosen construction method. Carving a large, smooth, enclosed space from solid rock will almost inevitably create a resonant environment, regardless of the builder's intention. The primary goal from this perspective was structural integrity and symbolic form. The wonderful sound was a bonus, a beautiful accident of physics that the priests and congregation later learned to utilize and cherish. This view holds that we might be projecting our modern fascination with applied science onto an ancient people who were primarily motivated by faith and symbolism, not acoustic engineering. Yet, when you place Lalibela in the broader context of other ancient wonders, the argument for intentionality grows stronger. From the whispering galleries in certain European cathedrals to the resonating chambers in ancient Greek theaters, we have numerous examples of pre-modern cultures manipulating architecture to achieve specific sonic effects. The builders of Lalibela, connected to a wider world of knowledge through trade and religious exchange, could easily have been aware of such principles. The decision to create such vast, uninterrupted interior volumes and to finish the stone to such a smooth degree goes beyond the bare minimum required for structural stability. It represents a choice, an investment of extra effort that produced a specific, beneficial outcome. Whether this knowledge was gained through careful observation, received from distant traditions, or encoded in the legendary divine blueprint, the result is the same: an acoustic environment of such perfection that it feels unmistakably intentional. The resonant stones of Lalibela do not shout their secrets. They sing them in a sustained, ethereal chord that has echoed through 8 centuries of prayer, offering us a hint that the builders understood the power of sound to shape the human spirit long before the science of acoustics ever gave it a name. But to truly understand the soul of Lalibela, you need to step across the threshold and into the hushed, dimly lit world within the churches themselves. While the grand facades and monolithic scale are designed to inspire awe, the interiors hold a more intimate, whispered conversation with the divine, etched into every wall and pillar. We're familiar with the classic Christian iconography, the saints, the crosses, the biblical scenes, but if you look closer, past the obvious, you start to notice symbols that don't quite fit the standard script. It's here, in the shadows and the subtle carvings, that we may find the fingerprints of a deeper, more complex spiritual worldview, one that masterfully wove the new faith of Christianity with much older, indigenous beliefs that were already ancient when King Lalibela received his vision. A perfect place to begin this decryption is within the Church of Bete Mariam, a sanctuary renowned among the locals as one of the most sacred and symbolically rich. The interior walls are a tapestry of intricate bas-reliefs, and among the expected depictions of saints and angels, you'll find recurring motifs that puzzle the uninformed observer. Look up at the ceiling, for instance. You might see a pattern of interlocking swastikas, a symbol that, long before its tragic 20th century appropriation, was for millennia a near-universal sign of the sun, eternity, and well-being. In the context of medieval Ethiopia, this was likely a pre-Christian solar symbol, revered by the indigenous Agor peoples and other local groups. Its inclusion within the holiest of spaces wasn't an accident or an act of defiance. It was a brilliant act of theological diplomacy. By carving these ancient, respected symbols right alongside the cross, the builders were speaking a visual language that the local population could immediately understand. They were saying, in essence, your old gods are not being erased, they are being fulfilled and transformed within this new and greater truth. This syncretism made the new religion feel less like a foreign imposition and more like a natural evolution of their own spiritual heritage. This blending of worlds becomes even more explicit when you examine the famous carved column inside Bete Mariam, often shielded by a cloth and only revealed by the priests. One side of this pillar is covered with inscriptions that tell the story of the church's foundation in Jez, the ancient liturgical language, but it's the other side that truly captivates researchers. Here you'll find a series of enigmatic carvings that seem to depict celestial bodies, stars, moons, and what some interpret as planetary alignments. This is where the line between church and observatory begins to blur. Could these be mere decorations, or are they a coded reference to an astrological calendar, a way of marking sacred time that predated the Christian liturgy? The Agor and other Cushitic peoples of the region had a deep and sophisticated understanding of the stars, using them to guide their agricultural cycles and religious festivals. By encoding these astrological references into the very fabric of the church, the architects were effectively baptizing the local cosmos, integrating the rhythmic, predictable movements of the heavens that the people had always worshipped into the new narrative of a single, all-powerful creator God. This practice of celestial coding might extend far beyond a single pillar. Consider the overall layout of the entire Lalibela complex again, with its symbolic river Jordan and its division into earthly and heavenly Jerusalems. While this is profoundly Christian, it also mirrors a fundamental duality found in many indigenous African cosmologies: the concept of a world divided between the physical realm of the living and the spiritual realm of the ancestors and gods. The tunnels leading from one cluster to the other, which we discussed as representing the path through hell, could also be seen as a representation of the journey between these two worlds, a concept that would have been deeply familiar to the local population. The builders weren't just building for the Christian pilgrims from the High Court. They were building for the farmers and the herders, for the people whose spiritual roots ran deep into the Ethiopian soil. They created a landscape that resonated on multiple frequencies, satisfying the orthodox theology of the court while simultaneously speaking directly to the animist heart of the countryside. Unraveling this symbolic tapestry forces us to reconsider the identity of the master builders themselves. Were they solely devout Christian monks, or was their council far more diverse? It is highly plausible that the team included local shamans or wise men, elders who understood the sacred meanings of the swastika, the proper ways to honor the sun and moon, and the mythological significance of certain animals. This collaboration would explain the stunning fusion of styles and symbols. It paints a picture of a construction process that was not just about manual labor, but about a genuine exchange of spiritual knowledge. The resulting churches are therefore not pure, doctrinaire Christian statements, but something far more unique and powerful: a spiritual and architectural creole, a new language of faith forged from the meeting of two worlds. This hidden layer of symbolism is the key that unlocks the full, magnificent message of Lalibela, a message not of conquest but of integration, declaring that the divine could be found not only in the pages of a sacred text from a distant land, but also in the familiar shapes of the stars that had always shone over the Ethiopian highlands. Naturally, when faced with an accomplishment that so thoroughly resists conventional explanation, the human imagination doesn't just stop at angels or Templars. It ventures into territories that are even more expansive and speculative. This is where we encounter the most fringe, yet enduring, theories surrounding Lalibela, ideas that propose its creation was the work of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization, whose technological prowess has since vanished from history, or even suggestions of otherworldly intervention from extraterrestrial beings. These concepts lie firmly on the outer boundaries of archaeology, yet they persist because they attempt to answer a question that more orthodox approaches still grapple with. How could a society with such seemingly simple tools produce something of such staggering complexity and precision? The logic behind the lost civilization theory often points to the shadows of history that precede the known kingdoms of the region. We know of the great Aksumite Empire, but what about the cultures that came before it? Proponents of this idea suggest that an even older, more sophisticated society, perhaps the legendary kingdom of Damot or a completely unknown precursor culture once thrived in the Ethiopian highlands. This hypothetical civilization, the theory goes, possessed a deep, almost scientific understanding of geology, engineering, and astronomy that was later lost during periods of war, famine, or cultural collapse. In this narrative, the builders of Lalibela didn't invent their techniques from scratch. They were merely rediscovering and repurposing ancient knowledge, perhaps even building upon the ruins or sacred sites of this forgotten people. The churches, then, would not be a 12th century creation in the traditional sense, but the last magnificent flowering of a technological legacy that was already thousands of years old, a final echo of a golden age whose true scope we can only dimly perceive. Even more extreme are the suggestions of extraterrestrial influence, which have been attached to ancient wonders from the pyramids of Giza to the lines of Nazca. For Lalibela, the argument often hinges on the sheer perfection of the geometry and the mind-boggling volume of rock removal. How, enthusiasts ask, could medieval workers achieve such flawlessly planar walls and perfect right angles without advanced guiding tools? How could they have the confidence to carve from the top down, a method that offers zero room for error without some form of advanced surveying technology, perhaps even laser-like devices? The legends of angels descending from the sky are reinterpreted not as spiritual metaphors, but as garbled eyewitness accounts of otherworldly visitors providing technical assistance or even advanced machinery. The intricate, star-aligned symbolism of the complex is seen not as theological, but as a message or a landing beacon for these celestial travelers. While this theory is dismissed outright by the academic community, its popularity underscores a profound point. When an ancient feat appears to defy all logical human capability, the human mind will inevitably reach for explanations that are themselves beyond our current understanding of the world. It is crucial, however, to understand why these extraordinary theories emerge and why they find such a receptive audience. They are not born in a vacuum, they sprout in the fertile ground of an explanatory gap. The established historical narrative, while rich and compelling, still contains those frustrating silences. We have the legend of the king, the evidence of the tools, and the timeline from carbon dating, but we lack the precise engineering manual, the name of the master architect, and a completely satisfactory account for the project's breathtaking speed and precision. This gap between what we know and what we see with our own eyes creates a vacuum, and nature, including human nature, abhors a vacuum. Speculative theories rush in to fill this void, offering sweeping, dramatic solutions to problems that conventional archaeology can only answer with patient, incremental, and often incomplete evidence. They provide a sense of closure and wonder that the messy, complicated reality of history often denies us. Ultimately, while these fringe ideas are captivating thought experiments, they are not supported by the material evidence we have at hand. The architectural and artistic styles at Lalibela are not anomalous. They are a logical, if brilliant, evolution of the Aksumite and Zagwe traditions. The tools, while simple, were clearly capable of producing the results we see when wielded by generations of highly skilled and patient artisans. The real danger of these theories is not that they are imaginative, but that they can inadvertently diminish the genius of the actual people and culture responsible for the wonder. To attribute Lalibela to aliens or a lost super-civilization is to rob the medieval Ethiopians of their own monumental achievement. It suggests that the people of the African continent were incapable of such innovation on their own, requiring outside, almost magical intervention. This is not just bad history, it's a disservice to the incredible ingenuity, faith, and sheer human effort that the Zagwe kingdom so clearly demonstrated. So, where does this leave us? The enduring power of the lost civilization and extraterrestrial theories serves as a powerful barometer for just how extraordinary Lalibela truly is. The fact that people feel compelled to invent such astounding narratives is in its own way the highest possible tribute to the builders. Their work was so masterful, so far ahead of its time in its execution, that it continues to push us to the very limits of our imagination in seeking an explanation. These fringe ideas, while not scientifically credible, highlight the profound and humbling mystery that lies at the heart of this rock-hewn sanctuary. They remind us that Lalibela's greatest secret may not be a single lost technology or a hidden blueprint, but the stunning, near-total realization of a vision that so perfectly merged spiritual ambition with engineering genius that it forever lives in that tantalizing space between the impossible and the real. And so we stand here at the end of our journey, gazing upon the monolithic majesty of Lalibela, a place that refuses to offer a single, simple answer. We've walked through the celestial legend of a king guided by angels and divine blueprints. We've marveled at the inexplicable engineering, the top-down carving of free-standing churches, the masterful hydraulic systems, and the resonant acoustics that seem to defy the rudimentary tools of the age. We've sifted through the carbon-dated evidence that suggests a timeline spanning centuries, challenging the story of a single, miraculous generation of construction. And we've wrestled with the immense logistical puzzle of the workforce, questioning whether it was fueled by devoted monks, a king's political will, or the unthinkable toil of slaves. We've even ventured into the shadows of speculation, considering the potential roles of outside influences from Coptic Egypt or the enigmatic Knights Templar. Yet with every layer we peel back, another appears beneath it, and the central, profound question remains stubbornly unanswered. How was this truly accomplished? The enduring power of Lalibela, the very source of its timeless enigma, is that it does not exist solely in one realm. It sits perfectly, tantalizingly, at the convergence of faith, history, and science. For the devout, the miracle is the explanation. The divine hand is the only force sufficient to account for such a marvel, making the search for earthly methods almost missing the point. For the historian, it is a complex puzzle of politics, social organization, and cultural exchange, a monument to a sophisticated African kingdom whose full story we are still piecing together. For the scientist and engineer, it is a breathtaking anomaly, a case study that challenges our assumptions about the technological capabilities of the 12th century. Lalibela comfortably inhabits all these spaces at once, satisfying none of them completely and thereby captivating all of them. It is a mirror reflecting back whatever we bring to it, our faith, our skepticism, our wonder. This is precisely why it continues to captivate us. In a world increasingly defined by data and definitive answers, Lalibela is a glorious refuge for mystery. It stands as a permanent, stone-carved challenge to the arrogance of the present, a humbling reminder that our ancestors were capable of achievements that we, with all our modern knowledge, still struggle to reverse engineer or fully comprehend. It whispers that there are gaps in our understanding of human history, pockets of genius and perseverance that the official record has either forgotten or never fully captured. The churches do not boast, they simply endure, their silence more eloquent than any explanation could ever be. They ask us not just to know, but to wonder. And so, the investigation is far from over. It now passes to you. We have laid out the clues, the theories, and the contradictions. Now, we want to hear your voice in this ancient conversation. What do you believe is the ultimate secret of Lalibela? Does your mind lean toward the spiritual certainty of the divine vision? Or do you see the fingerprints of a lost, advanced technology, whether it was inherited from Aksum or arrived from a distant land? Perhaps you have a theory all your own, one that connects dots we haven't yet seen. The comment section below is your forum. Share your thoughts, debate with fellow explorers, and keep this mystery alive. If you've been captivated by this journey into the heart of one of history's greatest puzzles, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are constantly on the trail of the world's most fascinating historical mysteries, and we'd love for you to join us on the next adventure. Because the greatest wonders, as Lalibela so beautifully proves, are not those that surrender their secrets easily, but those that guard them closely, inspiring generations to keep looking, keep questioning, and keep marveling at the incredible potential of the human spirit.